Good afternoon. I'm Enrico Michelutti. I'm an architect and researcher. I'm part of the NAERU's supporting group, and I'm really glad to welcome you in this third webinar of the joint work program Fostering Equitable Economic Growth in Cities, promoted by Cities Alliance in cooperation with NAERU's, Redeusz Lak, and AURI. The topic of this webinar is focusing the research as a vessel for equitable economic policy. In particular, how the research is promoting equitable economic growth. And the secondary focus for our webinar will be the comparison of strategies for engaging policymakers across global regions. Today, we will have with us two presentation, one by Joshua Drake from Cities Alliance, and a second one from the co-coordinator of this work package, Paula Alfaro d'Alençon from TU Berlin and NAERU's. And we will have some reflections from the global regions involved in our research by Pablo Cabrera Barona from Flaxo, sede Ecuador, and Malik Gaye from Senegal, and that group, AURI Research Network. Today, the discussion will be structured in four main parts. There will be a short introduction, a first overview on the joint work program done by Cities Alliance, a presentation of the preliminary results from a critical survey on the research policy making interface, a third part dedicated to reflection and responses from the global regions and our guest panelists, and the final part dedicated to questions, comments, and discussion with the audience. So I will start with a brief background on the topic. And so we can see that cities are often considered engines of economic growth, yet many cities are struggling to increase productivity and provide significant economic opportunities for their growing population. So in this framework, access to public goods and services is fundamental for the poor population and to strengthen growth and productivity of the city. In this context, there is a need for more knowledge on the links between public goods and services and equitable economic growth. And there is a need of understanding how to support such processes at the local and global scale. It's important to recognize at the same time that equity in economic growth can be best achieved when various stakeholders are working and participating in a collaborative way. And in these constellations and webs of relations, a key part is dedicated to the relationship between researchers and policymakers. So our focus will be on the research policymaking interface. We have in this project three main questions to approach the topic. The first one entails the interface itself. So what do interfaces between researchers and policymakers actually look like? And what roles do researchers take on in them? The second question is, how are these interactions further shaped by the regional context in which they take place? And to what extent do external dynamics or interest-driven actions influence the mechanism connecting research and policymaking for equitable economic growth? So we have three learning goals that we will try to achieve during this webinar. The first one is to present the preliminary results of a survey conducted among the research networks NAERU's, AURI, and Redeusz Lak about the interlinkages between researchers and policymakers for promoting EEG. The second goal entails the discussion among researchers in the network regions and the specific challenges which influence the role of local researchers in that specific context. The third aim of the webinar is to assess and to catalog different strategies for strengthening linkages between researchers and policymaking, and to reflect on the impact that stronger linkages can have in this perspective. So I leave the floor to Joshua Drake for an overview on the joint work program. Thank you very much.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Josh Drake. I'm the program manager for the joint work program on equitable economic growth at the Cities Alliance. What I'm going to talk about first is the research context for the joint work program, as well as the program design, and then also a little bit, just very briefly, about what was found in the program and this interface between research and policymakers. So the joint work program on equitable economic growth, or EEG, has been a 4-year program that is focused on fostering EEG in cities of the Global South. And in particular, it's looked at how access to public services and public goods affects EEG, especially for the urban poor and especially for those living in secondary cities. Back in 2016, there were 2 research papers that were done that underpinned the joint work program and that first established the importance of EEG. Those papers summarised the prevailing evidence in the research that while urbanisation is generally correlated with economic growth in the majority of cases has been far from equitable, particularly in cities of the Global South. Not everyone has benefited and not in the same way. So, you know, some people say at this point, to what extent does that actually matter if it's equitable? If everybody's wealth is increasing, does it matter that some people's increases more than others? But what our research argued was that economic growth and equality are in fact complementary. You know, given that inequality actually reduces aggregate demand in an economy, and therefore it can take the momentum out of economic expansion. It's also been shown that inequality can often lead to political and economic instability, which in turn reduces investment and reduces your economy's resilience in shocks or in times of crisis, like what we're in right now, for example. So I think, you know, even putting aside these any moral arguments for why you should pursue equitable growth, there are also purely economic and purely growth-based reasons to do that. So once that importance was established from the literature, the next question was, you know, what is the pathway? What are the most viable options to achieving equitable economic growth? And what kind of projects would it be wise to fund? So our research argued that any attempt at EEG needs to place great emphasis on employment creation. And the most effective way that you can do that is to develop the informal economy. So to develop the informal economy, well, you need to look at what kind of constraints are there. And one of the key constraints is the ability of informal workers and businesses to access and profitably use public goods and services. If they're not able to do this, then there's really no platform upon which they can build businesses and their livelihoods. And when I'm talking about public goods and services, this covers quite a wide range of things, such as public transport, public spaces, health and education, environmental and ecosystem goods. So these are all sort of the sub-themes and topics that the joint work program has worked in. So I'd say that is the research context of the JWP, and that was on the basis on which it was designed. The program design has 3 overarching components. The first one is global policy dialogues. So over the past 4 years, Cities Alliance has facilitated 5 policy dialogues, and the purpose of these has been to bring together experts on different topics in EEG and to catalyse debate amongst these experts, and that the information that we've gained from those has then fed into other aspects of the program. And these dialogues have also helped us raise awareness of EEG and awareness generally of what we're doing in the program. The second component has been global knowledge products. So there have been 8 publications that have been produced on particular topics, and they have then also fed into the third component, which is something called the Campaign Cities Initiative. So this initiative is what represents our on-the-ground or local impact. So this the Campaign Cities Initiative has involved us partnering with 8 cities in 4 partner countries to produce local assessments of that identified 2 public goods and services that should be prioritised in each case in order for further investment and in order to enhance access to these public goods and services to drive EEG. So this was a very impactful initiative, and the prioritised public goods and services they varied quite a lot because it was context dependent. So for example, in some cities the focus was on the waste management system or the fiscal administration capacity, and in others it was access to water or medical waste was one of them. So it really varied based on the context. In terms of the findings, I'm not going to go into the findings so much now. Firstly, because it's the findings have been so wide-ranging. This is not really the format to do it, but I would say that you can go onto our website, the Cities Alliance website, and click on the EEG page, and also next week, in fact, we are publishing a synthesis report on the Joint Work Programme, which is essentially a report that's going to summarise the 4 years, everything, all the activity that's happened in those 4 years, and provide the key takeaways and areas for improvement and that kind of thing. So you can look out for that next week. And then I think just lastly, what I'll say, and to bring it back to the central theme of this webinar, is that I think the Joint Work Programme has been an example of the flow of research, beginning with the research that fed into the program design, through to policy dialogues, and then knowledge publications, and then finally towards on-the-ground impact through the Campaign Cities Initiative. Thank you.
Jederzeit sprechen. Okay?
Ja, warte mal ganz kurz. Ja, ich muss jetzt nur wo sind denn die Survey, wo sind die Nummern von den Slides? Das ist natürlich jetzt doof. Weil jetzt sehe ich nicht, wo die Slides sind. Scheiße. Learning Goals, ah ja, ist 7, Moment, 7 ist denn Learning, warte mal ganz kurz, ja?
Mhm.
Ich muss mich nur ganz kurz nochmal orientieren, wo meine Learning Goals ist 7, dann ist Today's Structure sind 8, dann Josh ist weg, dann kommen die Survey Methods, das ist 11. Survey Respondents ist dann, okay, gut.
Okay.
Dann fangen wir Presentation, genau, dann fangen wir hier an und das ist jetzt Today's Structure. Okay, also anfangen, Moment. So, und jetzt musst du ganz, ganz kurz warten, ja, weil ich muss jetzt noch einmal kurz hier irgendwie Franziska was schreiben und dann können wir loslegen.
Alles gut.
Okay, so, ich mache mal jetzt WhatsApp aus.
Okay. Ich
So,
mache mein
okay.
Mikrofon aus und dann kannst du
Und dann sagen wir 10 Minuten, ja?
10, wie lange du hast. Also, wie gesagt, ursprünglich war 15. Wenn du 10 kannst, dann gerne.
Ja, und dann machen wir das andere.
Genau.
Ne? Okay,
Okay.
gut. Dann fangen wir mal an. Okay, so I start with a presentation of the results from the critical survey on research policy interfaces. As Enrico already was stating, we did a research, and this research was basically done in the framework of the project that we are in collaboration with Cities Alliance undertaking. And it was done from December 2019 to now January 2020, and we just finished with the elaborations of the, let's say, the first draft that we have actually. And what was for us very important is to have this possibility to get in touch with our colleagues from the other networks, from the AURE network, from Latin America, from Africa, and from the Redeo Slack network from Latin America, to understand more, let's say, the local developments or the local somehow tendencies that we could somehow understand that are taking place in the different regions about this term of equitable economic growth, firstly. And secondly, as we already stated, we are here in the field of urban research and urban planning. So there was this understanding, or the need to understand how, in the frame of urban development, equitable economic growth, or even growth, and what we do with as researchers with that, is playing a role. So we asked the questions: what areas of equitable economic growth are particularly important in your region, right? So it was very much related to the questions on contents, in terms of what kind of policies we can identify, what kind of terms are related with them. And on the other hand, as we already know from our research that we are undertaking on this term of equitable economic growth, and also the definition that Cities Alliance is putting forward, the understanding of how do researchers, or let's say different actors, are interconnecting to this to the development of the understanding of equitable economic growth is very much key. So we are talking here about multi-actors perspectives on this term. We are talking also, and this we would talk further on this idea of co-production, where we also share knowledge, and on let's say on a equitable way about the understandings, the mechanisms, the programs which are related with equitable growth, or at least are somehow trying to make a stake here. And the other one then was the third question, which was, I mean, this was the question that we asked then in the second one: in what areas is there a strong connection between research and policy making, and what areas there is a gap. So there was this understanding that possibly we could learn more about local tendencies and also about local mechanisms to interconnect this kind of blurry field about urban development, which is usually very much related also with the economical development of the countries and also the regions or the cities itself, and this understanding of how you can incorporate this term of equitable economic growth. So this was then the second question. And the third question what is the position, role of research and challenges for research in your region? So here it's upcoming this entire field of policy research interfaces, and what are the challenges which could be in the countries or in the regions that we did research on. So some kind of data to give you the overview of the research that we did. As already explained, we did this, we started in December 2019 to do the research. Actually, we are on a draft version, so we are revising this. So therefore, everything what actually we are here saying is also an intermediate stage of the research. And we also used a quantitative and qualitative data analysis in terms of that we started to open up with this research. We want to now enter more in the qualitative analysis on different tendencies that we could somehow find in the regions itself. And here also we did research, as already said, in among the members of the different research networks on NAEDOS in Europe, Audi in Africa, and Redeus Slack, and we had 20 response, which is also presenting a very low number, so that we need somehow to enter now into the qualitative data collection of what we so far found already. The first thing that we asked here you see already the different regions of the world where our respondents are working. So firstly, the Cono Sur and the Latin American region here, very much presented by a lot of AURI research, a lot of Redeus Slack researchers, but also some AURI, some NAEDOS researchers are also doing research there. Then we see here the European context, and you see here the African context also presented by the AURI researchers. And what was the first thing that we asked them is, what is equitable economic growth in their framework? So how they can understand this, and what are the most important parts out of it? And because we know, I mean, this is the definition that we are working with from Cities Alliance. So equitable economic growth describes a long-term sustainable economic growth that creates economic opportunity in the form of decent, productive employment opportunities in both the formal and informal sectors, accessible to all members of society, right? And so we started to make this analysis while we were also doing research on them, and we could understand that how we can incorporate equity into planning process in particular. There was also very important this kind of understanding of the decision-making level, and through a common broad consensus among scholars that we are doing research on. It is very much mentioned that equitable economic growth, or something which we could somehow find in the frameworks itself, because we could not find this term in itself, is very much related with an ethical expression and often linked with justice that claims everyone to have the opportunity to access the same resources. This was one which was very much present in the research that we did on, and there was this other towards the planning of urban services in cities. For example, there were identified 3 forms of equity. One is the distributive equity that refers to the benefit among a lot of different stakeholders, where you can obtain a kind of equitable or equity in the resource itself. Then there was the other one related to decision-making processes, which is also related to the research policies interfaces. And there was also this contextual equity, so which relates to pre-existing conditions, which determines the citizens and users' participation in the decision-making process in itself. So what we did here is we started to question in this different region, what is a term that they could associate with what we were asking them. And what we found out is, firstly, that we have equitable economic growth through better access to goods and services, which is very much echoing also what Cities Alliance in itself was explaining, and something which is for us very interesting from the research perspective was this understanding of equitable economic growth through broader inclusion and participation in decision making and knowledge co-production, right? So the term itself, knowledge co-production, was something which came very much from the European research network, while we saw already that from the global south, we could not so easily find, or not, there was not a mention of co-production itself. So we have here to assume that this term of knowledge co-production or co-production itself is something which is very much related with the global north, and at least from the research perspective from the global north, and very much also related to what we also called in the 1990s this kind of move to or the neoliberal move that also European was doing at that time, right? So there was this first mention in the 1980s by Ostrom, where she also coming from the UK, and in these times where a lot of let's say state and welfare activities, and also let's say the whole context was so much was removed from the state, or the state in itself was removing its activities. There was this kind of understanding coming on how we can fit the gap, how we can work better together with different parts of the society. So this is why this understanding of knowledge co-production, and in particular institutionalized co-production, was very much moved and very much also in the framework in Europe. While when you look to the Latin American context, you don't see this so much, right? We will hear later on also from Latin America, where they are driving, or they are doing research on other aspects, like alternative understandings of, for example, the perception of growth, while we in Europe, we had this kind of very strong move to that understanding. So here, what was also very important for us was to ask the different participants what kind of policies they see related with the understanding of equitable economic growth. And what was also here interesting was that we found from NAEDOS very much the policies which are related, or which are, let's say, assumed to be related to equitable economic growth, are included in the topics, for example, of sustainability and resilience. So there was always this kind of factor related to that it needs to be sustainable, so that whatever is related with equitable economic growth needs also to have to be somehow resilient in the understanding, for example, of the use of resources. There was also very much relations to circular, for example, economies, right? And also to this understanding, also where what we will also read or hear more about this, is this understanding of commons and also of the co-production. So in terms to understand how we can do other kind of governance processes where we can relate also to equitable economic growth, and in terms of urban development related also with economical activities. So this was what was coming out of NAEDOS, while, for example, if we look more on the understandings or the results that we got here, or the mentions that we got out here of policies related with equitable economic growth coming from South America or Latin America and Africa, there was always this understanding of reducing inequalities and improving economic development and living standards. So there was this kind of development perspective very much related to that, in terms of that equitable means also that everybody participates on already the development of this kind of parts in the urban development, right? So there you see very much a very strong difference that we could understand. And what was very much there also related was, for example, also from the global, from the Redeos, was interrogating the concept of inequality in welfare, for example, very much related with which what was I explaining in the beginning, and also incorporating the notions of sustainability and resilience in the EEG definition, as I also explained already, and the redefining the concepts of development and living standards, which was related with the global south. So the next one was asking about the role of researchers, which what is the role that in particular our colleagues are seeing when it comes to this EEG definition, then or the context in itself. And firstly, there was this understanding that research can act as a political alternative, not in terms of that we understood, and this was what the report was coming. This report was coming out of this, like theories and or applied research depend on rationalities linked in different ideas of development and growth, and knowledge co-production appears as a response to conciliate such conflictive rationalities or even disciplinary fragmentation. So the respondents underlined the specific responsibility of the research to bringing academic and non-academic partnerships, selected policies and initiatives tend to be seen as not very inclusive, right? So there was here already this mention that different partnerships needs to somehow come up to be related for the role of researchers in this kind of frameworks. So, however, the main concern for researchers is not the inclusion itself, as you see here, for example. So what is the most important level where this can take place was here the question. So it is more related with the implementation. So in terms of how, for example, in urban development, can this effort of this understanding of how you can let everybody participate in the decision-making process, or how can everybody be part of the decision-making process, and how you can also exchange knowledge, is something which where our research colleagues are very much concerned with, and this counts basically for the three networks in itself, and in particular when it comes to this understanding of development. However, and this is something where you can see that at least the field in itself is still very blurry, right? So if you then started to question our colleagues what kind of really real experience they have on this kind of understanding of research policy interfaces, then in implementation strategies, then you see that there is not so much really on a kind of a standardized response that we could acquire actually. So this is where we have to deepen into that actually. So we have to understand what kind of mechanisms are actually, we can count them into this, the idea of this kind of understanding. So our takeaways from the research that we have done so far is here that the definition of EEG should include improving quality of life for the urban poor and other disenfranchised groups, and should include a notion of sustainability. So here we are putting together this kind of answers that we obtained to make a more precise definition of what we could find here of EEG, and also let us go further to understand better what kind of mechanisms also we have to do research on. And on the other hand, there is this kind of policies for promoting EEG often relate to either the improvement of goods and services, as I was explaining in the first slides, for broader social groups, or the inclusion of unhealed groups in policy processes. Then The third takeaway is research can be used to generate knowledge, transfer knowledge, or co-produce knowledge. Here we put also the role which the researchers can play here, and which will also help us to understand further this kind of mechanisms that we want to understand of the context of research policy interfaces. And when it's coming to this understanding, research and policymakers interact in policy surrounding the urban built environment and the social inclusions, right? So these were two strengths and two parts where we also need to make further research on. And so far, little distinction between global regions goal for today, which we will have today on our webinar. We need to understand more about this. We already said that we actually have one finding out of that, and our survey needs more concrete cases as examples, which is also a goal for today for our webinar, to understand what cases, or better on what kind of methods and what kind of mechanisms do we need to understand to come closer to this blurry field of research policy interfaces. And our survey on the global agendas tend to serve as the backdrop for EEG policy and to interlink research and policy making. It means that we have still a very broad, let's say, new urban agenda, Agenda 21, all these different agendas which are related with this understanding of equitable economic growth, which others global agendas are not giving so much perspectives on how to implement them. Rather on, they are helping us to be this kind of umbrella for the term itself, but we have to deepen very much.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to comment your project. I'm Pablo Cabrera Barona. I'm professor at the Latin American Social Science Institute. I got my PhD at the Department of Geoinformatics in the University of Salzburg, Austria. My research interests are related to urban studies at the intersections of economy, health, social sciences, and geographic information science. Okay, I would like to comment about your project. First, I would like to begin by looking at the terms of equitable economic growth. I'm quite okay with this term because equitable express not only equality but also justice. But in the case of the term economy, I would suggest you to incorporate several innovative concepts and methods about economy to go beyond this traditional orthodox, heterodox dichotomy. For instance, instead of thinking the traditional economics, you can think about the complexity science, yeah, and include several interesting approaches about economics, like evolutionary economics, complex economics, among others. I would also suggest you to incorporate some native or indigenous perspectives in your work. This is very important, especially for the Global South. There are several indigenous approaches that maybe could offer a more pluralistic and horizontal discussion in your work. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and the third issue about equitable economic growth is the term growth. Personally, I consider that growth is the opposite, at least in the current economic system. Growth is just the opposite of sustainability. Yeah. All in all, I would suggest to work and develop the concept of equitable, sustainable economy, not growth, but equitable, sustainable economics. Okay, let me know, move to give you some ideas about how the linking between research and policy making. For me, a bridge between policy and research is geoinformation. Geo means geographic information, technology, and information in general. Why, for instance, it is far easier to understand, interpret diverse phenomena from maps than from abstract statistical tables. Just think in the COVID-19 dashboards that many people are producing now in this COVID-19 context. Is it easier to interpret COVID-19 cases around the world from these maps and not from statistics in general? Also, another advantage is that you can express different kind of data at different levels. For instance, national level, county level, provincial level, and of course, global level. Another advantage of using geoinformation as an approach to inform research results to policymakers is because I will say that almost all kinds of data can be geo-specialized, yeah, can be expressed in a map. So it's very useful. It's very useful to express data in the space. Finally, I will say that another dimension that could support decision making and also policy makers is what we call the volunteer geographic information. Yeah, volunteer geographic information is any kind of information that people, citizens, or researchers can upload in online and express in a map. Maybe OpenStreetMaps and Google Maps are the more general examples, but we can develop different platforms, geospatial infrastructures in order to visualize people's feelings, concerns, people's information. That is called volunteer geographic information, to express very easily in that territory. This information could be very useful for decision makers too. To summarize what I have what I have commented in this morning, there are two principal points that I mentioned. That okay, please think in economics approaches beyond traditional discussions. Yeah, think also in degrowth. And also think in information, including voluntary geographic information and social sensing as a research and policy making interfaces. Okay, thank you.
Okay. My name is Malik Gai. I'm architect and urban planner, and actually I am the executive director of ENDA RUP. ENDA mean Environment and Development Action in the third word, and RUP mean Participatory Urban Development. It is an entity of the network of ENDA. So ENDA is about 20 entities throughout the world, in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa, North Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa. So, I was been developing in ENDA the co-production of knowledge and co-production of habitat and urban development. So I'm one of the founder of AWURI. AWURI is the African Urban Network Initiative on urban issues in Africa, on co-productions. And then we involved on this project, this joint work program for fair economic growth and access to public services, because it's very linked to our basic work, which is mainly based in what we say co-production or popular economy, urban economy. And this very specific experience, very pragmatic experience is you have a co-production, informal economy or popular economy that we are promoting in the downtown of Dakar City. Dakar City is the capital of Senegal, about 50 million of population, and the city is about 3 to 4 million of inhabitants. And in this area, in the town about a bit less than 1 hectare, you have about 1,000 of people who are living there, and the 20% of this population is very active on the urban economic popularity, and is contributing for about, if you take accordingly with the statistics, the informal sector contribute about 60% of the urban economy. That one also is contributing about 60% of the national GDP. And this is very important, that the economy of our countries in the sub-Saharan Africa is driven by cities, and the cities are built by the people where they settle their economical activities. From there, they got their revenue and contributed to the growth of the nation and of the city. And it's why the objective of our project is to protect and to promote them. Is the first stage of this work is to give them the right to be to the city, to get there. It's why we got funded to buy the plot of the land, about less than 1 hectare, to save this land by getting a loan from the state. So the state and the government are involved in this project, and then because they have to provide the land, and also to provide the authorizations about improving the living condition of the workers, of the actor of this economy, the actor of these co-productions. And then by protecting their work, and you will see there is many kind of occupations that you will see in this presentation. So the areas is about that one, and you see this area, and the part in below here, it's an area for urban agriculture space, and all this party is a slum where ENDA was been involved in, and ENDA start on improving the living condition of these people, including their livelihood by giving or putting facilities for putting schools for the children, facilitating the zoning of the program. So this is a brief presentation of our office there, when we are working on the issues of social productions of goods and services, but also to promote the micro enterprise, local enterprises, and the integrated environment management, and to also reinforce, to empower let's say the capacity of all the actors of the city, and also including the local authorities, who are very weak because they don't have enough human resources to handle the management of the city. So we have been also working a lot in terms of planning and designing of the city in the participatory base. So we also animated a lot of networking. That's why we are in Auri, and we have also developed many best practices and the leadership and local leadership politics, urban politics, best practices and best policies. So the area we are working is here, and the urban popular economy, as I say, contribute about 70% of the African city economy growth, which represents 60% of the GDP. Actually, the connection is made by the sustainable national voluntary report that we can talk about afterwards. So I will continue just to present the area. So at the first stage, we clean the area, we improve the livelihood of this area, and then the profile of this area, and through the street you can see here in the middle of this capital of Dakar, you have buildings, you have the city center, which about just 15 minutes walk from this area, and you have the street facet of this area, and this place names is Khadim Rasul. So you have the social map of the district makes it possible to distinguish it from the local flowing features of that. So here you see the activities, what kind of activities, the workers on woods, the vendor of the woman who is cooking for the restaurant, because you are in the center of Dakar, and you have also a military campus, which is just in 5 minutes walk from there. All of them constitute a customary for this. So this place is a place where you can generate a lot of revenue. And we also was been collaborating with universities in France and in Germany. Is why you have here a lady, she's an Italian lady, but was doing their degrees in France, and then they also sit in our office as internship about 60 months, about 6 months, and during these 6 months we develop surveys in this area, and we identify priorities for people. So why here I put socioeconomic figures about that. So we know that their revenue is about only €5 in inhabitant per month. So if they have to contribute to any effort, attempt of doing better for this area, they cannot go further than paying more than €5. So, but they are willing to contribute about that. Among also the activities that generate revenue, it is also the fabric of marmits. You know, he's a vendor of bottles. You have the mechanicians who of automobile. So you see how centered is this area. So after being doing the planning of that, we also put in here a map for the existing building location of the artisans. You have artisans for the sake of precise and meticulous investigation was carried out to list the existing equipment and the professional activities coexisting in this district. The listing here give you the detail of mechanism, artisan for the wood, the woman who is doing restaurants, you know, the brocanters. There is a set of them. And then here you have the first part of the project, that all this in this our survey are the checks dwellers, the homes in yellow here, and in the green here point you have the activities, and here you have also everything links to school and the artisan. So we do the equipment, and then we do some kind of, let's say, evaluation of the project, which is planned to be another things in terms of involvement. For example, this space is in the project submitted to the local authorities for authorization. We will fit here all the vendor of bottles. So we put in hall, and we put also some boxes where they can fit their activities. And here you have the school, and the building there you have also the building for the lady who is doing also let's say this is doing the restaurants. And here you have the street that is going. Here you have the artisan space. Here you have the lavender. The lavender is the woman who wash the vestment, the clothes, cleaning clothes. So it is very remunerable revenue of activities. And then here also you have the perspective during school, and you have the axonometry of the project. Here, this district, you have two main roads, two main street here, Tolbiac and Felix Eboué, and we only have one road inside for the car who come for provisions of the artisans. And here it is a restaurant, and here it is a bottle. There you have the mechanisms. Here you have the school here. So this is what we have been doing so far in terms of promoting the social production of housing, which is a co-production of housing, but also the social production of the co-production of the economy, of the popular economy, but also co-production of social, because we have a link between the local authorities, the cherchers, the civil society, the artisans, the inhabitants. So we put a kind of, a participative body of consultation between all these 4 to 5 different category of actors, coming from the inhabitants to the authorities who take the decisions. And the decision has been taken to preserve this economy because this economy is an equitable economy, because he contributes to the growth of the economy, but also he provides goods and services, access to land, access to, let's say, productive services, and also access to basic services like water and energy, electricity, etc. So this is the end of my first presentation, Colin. Thank you very much.
I would like to frame now the response that we obtained from the NAEDUS network, which, as I said in the forehand, it is very much related to this understanding of co-production and commons. And firstly, I have to mention that this understanding of, or let's say the notion of co-production is very much related to this global agendas, like, for example, the new urban agenda, right? But however, as I was also mentioning in the beginning, we don't find so well this understanding of how you can implement this, right? And this is something which from the NAEDUS network was very interesting, because I mean, when you look back, for example, on the first research that has been done with this framework of co-production and commons, we will now reach Ostrom in the 1980s, Great Britain, right, where this kind of neoliberal wing already started in Europe. And there she was starting to understand how we can use better this understanding of resources in a more equitable way, right? So you will not find in this definition of co-production this access of goods and services, but you will find something related with the equitable access to resources, and therefore this entire that I was framing in the beginning, this understanding of sustainable and resilient urban development. And actually we see here also in the last literature in Europe, we see a lot of this research on urban co-production, which is related with the resource land, right? And how with land policies, with different mechanisms of access to also land and also to housing stock and building stocks, we can develop more equitable urban development. And this is interesting because it has, let's say, by the way, a very different approach, but it is also talking about this understanding of an equitable economic growth, because if there is this development, it should be then for everybody. And this is this understanding of the commons in itself. And there's the second thing, which also a lot here at the Technical University we are doing research on, is this understanding of co-production in terms of the knowledge co-production. And there was also there were a lot of mentions related with this for the sustainable urban development or resilient urban development, this understanding of Reallabore, where we find what we say this kind of multi-actors and also inter and transdisciplinary networks of different actors in road and urban development, where the most important thing, or one of the precondition of this kind of Reallabor, or the real labs that we could translate so far, is this understanding of that we have to share knowledge in terms of whether to understand how, from the built environment disciplines, we can act accordingly to different parts of the disciplines, like planning, like, for example, also the research in itself. And also, on the other hand, there is this understanding that we have to share knowledge on not only in the silos of the academia, rather on we have to go and start to make also this kind of research, the citizen science, for example, also related with citizens, with different actors out of our disciplines, to understand more how we can create knowledge on the development itself, and give this kind of understanding where we have to go forward. And by the way, make this kind of equitable, again, something which is related with different parts of the society, where we obtain this knowledge and we start to do this kind of developments. And I think this is a point, right, when we think again on this understanding of research policy interfaces, then this kind of governance that is present here, of multi-actors, also of different parts of the governance levels in itself, it's very much interesting to start to dialogue on this with our other colleagues, and to understand what kind of governance do they have on mechanisms to interlink for equitable economic growth, to interlink different actors and to produce different mechanisms, or if they have different mechanisms already installed. This will be the next step that we will do now with this research.
So I would say that it's been both. I mean, definitely, there was a very deliberate attempt at the beginning to base the whole joint work program on research. And so in the beginning, there was a theory of change that was created. So that theory put forward, from how do you achieve EEG, and what sort of outcomes in the context of what Cities Alliance is capable of doing. What can you actually do to achieve it? And so that's what I was talking about the the flow of research and that theory about why EEG is important, and what you need to do to focus on it. So we thought that the biggest impact that we could have based on the research was by increasing access to public goods and services. So that was all based on academic research. And then I would say that the research links continued throughout the program implementation, because we had the 8 global knowledge products, which were all ground in research, and they then sort of fed down the chain and into the Campaign Cities initiative, which really represented the most sort of implementation-based output of the program. So I think that there is there's perhaps room for improvement as well, but I do think it's been kind of a strength of the program that it's really we've really been able to actually point to this was the research that was done, and these were the people that did it, and that's why we designed the program the way that we did.
Yes, thank you very much for the question, Nora. And yes, there is in the survey a specific place also for other global regions. For example, we have a part of our project list dedicated to projects in Asia, and including the Middle East in particular, for instance, a case study coming from Palestine. So yes, there is one of the objectives is to include also other global regions in the research. And of course, a cross-regional analysis is one of the key parts of our research. So we are developing an analysis crossing data coming from different sources, including Latin America, Africa, and Asia, and Europe. And so we are trying to provide this cross-regional analysis for the interface research policymaking. So thank you very much for the question.
All right, and I will ask one more question here while I have you. Let me find it. There we go.
Okay, the politician, the authorities, the local authorities has get involved because as civil society organization, and we have saw that they would like to evict them, to evict the slum dwellers because rich companies would like to come and to settle here, why they don't have right to the land. So ENDA may do a survey and see that this plot of land is belong to another company during the colonial time, and then we negotiated with the ADF money to buy this land for the slum dwellers here. So it is ENDA who involve the local authorities, but at the same time, as we are working to do network with UN Habitat since long time, since the International Year of Homelessness in 88, we was in Berlin. At this time, we have participated at the exhibition of who happened in Berlin in the Reichstag, and we since this time we work and we produce a lot of best practices with UN Habitat. So during after 5 years after the Habitat 2 of Istanbul, we have also involved the issue of observatories of urban development and urban growth. So it brings the great campaign for good governance and security land for people. So the couple team of the international campaign to sensitize all the authorities, member of United Nations, was been developed in this area of Khadim Rasul. Here is our office, and this space we gathered here more than 2,000 or 3,000 of people here in 2004 to have the campaign, and we have exposed at this campaign the strategy of our work to bring people for knowing the knowledge about that. So we have produced a knowledge for this approach of improving the area, for improving the economy of the informal sector, to save the development of this economy, so to let this economy contribute to the economic growth, but at the same time, it allows access to land, access to water, to electricity, access to the people services and good, through access to the services provided by the inhabitant of these areas, for mechanisms, artisans, women wash the the clothes women who develop restaurants, and the men who are vendor of bottles. So there is this areas is very growny areas of economy in the center of Dakar. So they will have a right to the city to be here at the end of the story. Let's say there is two kind of let's say people. You have the central government who cooperate very less, because the central government is who promote evictions, but you have the city local authorities who is more interested in terms of cooperations, because these authorities are very close to the inhabitant. The inhabitant are citizen because they vote, and they mainly in this downtown. There is a lot of slums inside in the downtown, and the voters for the elections are the poorest. So the local authorities are willing to cooperate with them. Otherwise, they take the risk to not to win the elections. So while ENLA is working in terms of providing to the authorities documentation, the plan, at the same time, the inhabitant and the actors, the artisans, also they build themselves in associations, in small scale enterprises, and they go together and to meet the local authorities for negotiating with them, much more voice to have right to sit here and to develop their activities.
Super. Yeah. Okay. Of course, I have two examples. One example is we work for around 1 year with all the indigenous nationalities of the Ecuadorian Amazon, and what we did was to express indigenous perspectives in land use planning, and also in what we call quality of life planning. Yeah. And to support this work, we produced social maps. I mean, in workshops, indigenous people just started mapping their territory and identifying in these maps problems they had, perspectives they had, ideas they had for development. And recently, we also have worked in rural parishes in the metropolitan district of Quito, interviewing the presidents of these local governments, because rural parishes are local governments in Ecuador. And we talk about sustainable development goals and how these local governments are working in relation to these goals. What we mapped the frequencies. So the presidents of the local parishes reported us the frequencies they work regarding a specific goal. Yeah, and we mapped these frequencies we put these frequencies in a map, and we associated these frequencies with additional information that, for example, forest, land cover, forest, yeah, hydrological information, etc. So to end, it was very useful to have in the same map, yeah, information about how frequent they work about forest issues, and also the perceived efficiency in working about forestry issues, and also to overlap this information with the forest in the rural parishes. So this is like two examples that to show how can we work with geoinformation and participatory approach in order to support decision making.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We can for sure have a deeper link between researchers and policymakers and actors dealing with politics. There is a long research process dealing with city and right to the city. And in this case, there is a long and strong relationship between researchers and policymaking addressing this topic. But of course, all the processes entailing a participatory approach, including the research, are a fundamental field of action, both for policymakers and researchers, in order to improve this linkage between the research and the politics. So thank you for the question.